This week, Emmet and I complete our look at Jack Kirby's Fourth World with the graphic novel The Hunger Dogs. What does it say about our increasing reliance on technology a decade before most of us had heard of the internet? First, if you appreciate the work we do on Deconstructing Comics and our other podcasts, we'd love it if you'd support the show at patreon.com/deconcomics for as little as $2 a month. Check out our goals and rewards and pledge your support now at patreon.com/deconcomics. This is Tim.
This is Emmet.
And this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics. This is Tim in Tokyo with Emmet near Melbourne. How are you doing?
Cold and wet, Tim. Cold and wet.
Oh, no.
As before we started, I mentioned to you I ran out for coffee, and it is bucketing down here.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
It's had a little rain here this morning, but I don't think it's raining now. Just rained enough to prevent me from jogging this morning. But.
Well, there you go. Yeah, I wish I had that excuse. I wish I could say, I meant to go jogging this morning. No, I drove across town in a vehicle at speed, grabbed a coffee and a croissant, shoved both in my face. I'm highly caffeinated. My calorie intake is just soared. So incredibly unhealthy behavior on my part.
Okay. It's not so good. But anyway, so we are marching through the gates of victory. We're in the last installment of The Fourth World by Jack Kirby.
I feel so bad because I keep thinking of New Gods things to do, and I go, no, this is it. This is the end of it. And I go, but we could do the Justice League cartoon where the New Gods. I was like, no.
Well, we could always follow up with other creators' versions of the New Gods, but yeah, I have no experience with those.
It's interesting, and I meant to save this for later in the conversation, but I'll throw it in now. Very recently, I think the last fortnight, the Comics Journal ran an interview with Rachel Pollack, and I recently read her book on the tarot, and I'd never had an interest in the tarot before, and she's such a good writer. I was like, I need to. I bought the Heimdall deck, which I think she did a lot of work on. She's an excellent writer, and she writes with conviction, particularly about things that she's passionate about. And I had known for years the story of her getting the Doom Patrol gig after Grant Morrison finished, where she just was really passionate about doing it. She wanted to write about the trans experience that Morrison had touched on in their run. And she was like, I'm the person to write this. Give this book to me. So I knew that she had worked on Doom Patrol. I did not know that once she was in with the DC office, the likes of Tom Pear and the folks like that were throwing more work to her. And I did not know she did a run on the New Gods.
Oh.
And her take on New Gods sounds interesting, where she basically tries to do the whole The Last Jedi burn it all down approach, where both Darkseid and Highfather are pretty much taken off the board.
Okay.
And then it's like, what happens next? So I haven't read it. I would be interested to read it. It didn't last particularly long. I think it's just over a dozen issues or so. But yeah, she's such a good writer. I'd be really interested to check out. The thing is that if you read the interview in the Comics Journal, it's an excellent interview. And she doesn't hold back. But she, even now, it's been a few decades, she's still talking about how unhappy she was, because this is the 90s. She's so unhappy with the art because the artist was sort of aping the Image school. So there's lots of big butts and big breasts. And she's going...
and pouches.
No. These are gods. These are mythical creatures. Let's, not to say that there wasn't a lot of nudity. In fact, there was, but it was less disproportionate. She's like, no, this is completely distracting from the story I'm trying to tell. I don't want to put words in her mouth. Read the interview. She's remarkably salty about this. So. But yeah, no, I'd be curious to read that.
Okay, so The Hunger Dogs. This was a graphic novel as far as I can tell, it didn't actually have a date on it, but it's supposed to have come out with the comic's cover dated March 1985, which would be just 4 months after Even Gods Must Die.
Yeah, that was November 1984.
Right. Yeah, The Hunger Dogs was the fourth in a series of DC graphic novels. You know, in early 80s, graphic novels were like this brand new thing. You know, make a book-length story of that's comics. Wow. I remember Marvel also had like the series of graphic novels. Like I think the first one was the introduction of the New Mutants. Or was it
I think it was the Death of Captain Marvel?
Death of Captain Marvel, that's right.
Yeah, I remember reading that in a bookshelf there's a bookstore in Ireland, a bookstore chain called Eason's, and I was on a school tour to Limerick, and I picked up this book innocently. Captain Marvel, oh, he sounds fun. The Death of what? And I remember flipping through this book in a bookstore and being essentially traumatized by it. No! I didn't even know who Thanos was. There's the whole thing with Thanos and Captain Marvel going off into death together, and like there's this whole thing. Interesting you bring it up, given that, you know, Thanos is essentially a dark side knockoff. So yeah, but yeah, no, it's I think what's his face? Is it Englehart? Did that? I think it was Englehart. I think he credits himself.
That might be right.
As being, you know, one of the creators of the graphic novel, even though there's other people who say Will Eisner did it 10 years before, the late 70s.
Death of Captain Marvel was by Jim Starlin.
Oh, of course it was Starlin. I'm sorry, listeners. Of course it was Starlin, because Thanos is his baby. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Anyway, Starling credits himself. I will not besmirch Steve Englehart.
So, yeah, and there was also an X-Men graphic novel about televangelists. What was it called? God Loves Man Kills. God Loves Man Kills, right. Yeah, okay. Anyway, so this was the new hot thing, and so they decided, let's put out one by Jack Kirby, which turned out to be his last Fourth World story. Yes,
and it continues the themes of Even Gods Must Die. It sort of hammers home what he was trying to say, particularly with the character of Darkseid.
By the way, before we forget, I wanted to mention there are a couple of things that I hadn't noticed in the Fourth World. I think might have been something new in Even Gods Must Die that we see here too. One is crazy page layouts. Both of these final stories have some really weird page layouts. Sometimes it's a little hard to figure out the panel sequence, although sometimes he puts arrows in so that you don't get lost. The other one, I don't remember before people sort of swearing by saying cosmos.
Oh, that doesn't strike me as... I thought we'd encountered that before, but carry on.
We may have. I guess I'd never really noticed it before Even Gods Must Die. It seemed like it was happening a lot, and in this also.
Yes.
So, the titular Hunger Dogs are the subjugated people of Apocalypse who are fighting back in this story to some extent, also referred to as the Lowlies. But, wow, I mean... When we were finishing up Mr. Miracle, I was saying, you know, these are just kind of fun stories and there's not a lot of real meaning in it. This has so much meaning packed into it that I'm having trouble digesting it all. And it doesn't help that sometimes kind of the conversations, the progress of the conversations just feels unnatural, and sometimes I even feel like speakers are contradicting themselves within one conversation. I was like, there were so many lines. I was like, what does that mean? Which I don't recall having that kind of problem with the earlier work, but this was just kind of hard to understand what a conversation was about sometimes.
And for anyone who listened to our previous chat about Even Gods Must Die, that tiger comparison's back.
Yeah, it came back.
Talk about tigers.
And yet there are no tigers in the story.
Well, there's a tigra. But, yes.
Tigra or Tigra or however we're supposed to pronounce it. I mean, I feel like the Marvel character is Tigra because she's got a tiger motif, where this one maybe is Tigra because she doesn't have a tiger motif. I don't know.
I like that ruling. I'll go with that. She's got flamey hair, but that's about it. She's kind of feline though, but like I think that's interesting.
So
where would you like to start?
Well, yeah, early on, there's one of the conversations that I found kind of hard to follow. Darkseid is talking with one of his men about the weapons capable of putting an end to New Genesis. And it kind of felt like Darkseid was just being argumentative for the sake of being argumentative. Like, whatever the guy said, Darkseid would either contradict him or, just say, no, that's wrong, or, no, you don't understand. And and I felt like he should be agreeing with the guy in some cases.
Well, no, I mean, it's fulfilling the prophecy he made in the previous story where he's like, this technology is going to make us irrelevant. He's actually, his speech, he's genuinely upset. Like the 3 panels where he hears what his flunkey's saying, and then he just covers his eyes, he covers his mouth, then he's like, no. It's true, sire. We have a machine which can shake up Slum Area 9 with a sonic storm. The sort of removal of action from him and from beings like him. And we saw in the previous story that he resurrected his lieutenants and now they're basically shells. That machinery is replacing them, and machinery is now going to wage war on their behalf, terrorize the people of Apocalypse on their behalf, and essentially make him irrelevant. That's where this anger is coming from, and that's why he's insisting it's fear that rules the cosmos, primal, naked fear, and he believes the universe should be afraid of him.
Not afraid of machines.
Not afraid of machines. And machines don't enjoy fear. This is all about, I almost feel like this is all about Darkseid's own crapulence, his own pleasures. He wants to enjoy being the bad guy. He's like Scarface.
Wants to twirl his mustache.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for saving me from doing my Pacino impersonation there. The moment has passed, but yes, he's definitely railing against the dying of the light. In his case, the light is his own abilities as a dictator. The depiction of Darkseid in the story is interesting in how pathetic he comes to be seen as. Like, even when he enters the story, like, he descends from his throne, he gets involved in the action, he's firing off a pistol in some scenes, he's chasing his quarry through Apocalypse. Even when he does that and actually enters the plot proper, he looks pathetic. And I think that's deliberate on Kirby's part. And I've read something about the executive meddling in this story. I'm not sure how much to believe one way or the other. But the story goes that Kirby intended a bunch of these characters to die. Like, this was going to be the conclusion, the definitive conclusion, and one of those characters to die would have been Darkseid. But DC have already recognized that Darkseid is one of the properties within this.
Don't franchise. Kill our IP.
This is the one. This is the character they can spin off into different stories, right? So they want Darkseid to live. So he's to preserve Darkseid. So instead, I mean, the final appearance of Darkseid in this is so lonely and pathetic and sad. I think part of that feeds into the storyline about technology taking over. And just making him rage because he's going, well, I used to do all these things. I have all this power, and now I can't even use it because the machines are anticipating my cruelty based on an algorithm. Hey, this is very present day concerns here, folks. This is This is Darkseid as Jeff Bezos. The Hunger Dogs are the unionizing laborers in the Amazon fulfillment centers, and
Sure.
he's like, why can't I just replace them all with robots? And he's like, oh, if I replace them all with robots, then I can't be unnecessarily cruel to people. Oh, God damn it!
Robots don't have to pee in bottles.
Yes. Yeah, and given what's in the news, I can't help but being influenced. But I did start reading this as a story about Amazon, and that made me chuckle.
Yeah. So, I mean, clearly a lot of this is about the arms race, about nuclear weapons, and he's got what they call the micro mark, which I took to mean the atom. And it's just, it's a real tiny thing, but it has it looks like a face that's kind of scowling.
Even
which
comments on that.
Interesting.
Let's see how he sneers when he is magnified. Yes, I guess you could say nuclear power, but I think nuclear power has already appeared in the Fourth World. I think nuclear power more or less defined the Fourth World in that, you had a Ragnarok type event. And in this technologically advanced race of gods emerged from that. So it was very post-nuclear Kirby vision of mythology. I think Micromark is the technology as self-determining AI. It is the removal of any human agency. The Micromark will destroy a planet just because it can. It's like Prince Charles's nightmare vision of the grey goo theory, but it's nanites. But I think in this case, it relates to technology. I think it's Isaac's invention, isn't it? It's Isaac's discovery. And I was thinking about this as well, given the last issue of Mr. Miracle and how his technology suddenly fails because Darkseid's lieutenants actually know how to use it. Darkseid and his crew have always been very technologically focused. Highfather's New Gods, they were more divinely inspired, let's say. They use technology as well, obviously, but they seem more interested in the source and trying to abide by the source. And they're more like a happy clappy cult. Darkseid is all about industrialization, is all about the advancement of technology, and now it's at the point where that technology is making all of Darkseid's plans and culture irrelevant. Like nothing that he decides really matters anymore because the Micromark and the computers will pretty much do it, and they'll do it automatically. And that's what's nightmarish to him. It's like, oh, right, I don't even need to be here. Just do it. Which brings me back to that idea of him being a sort of pathetic figure in this. But also Isaac is, this pathetic creature.
Right.
And,
well, yeah, we saw him as a kid in the New Gods series, and in this, he was always hanging around with Metron, and Metron went off somewhere. He was go to look for the ultimate object, and Isaac continued Metron's work, and in the style of a Spider-Man villain, something blew up, and it made him this kind of little orange guy who doesn't look anything like the kid Isaac, and he's working for Darkseid, more or less.
Well, it's quite tragic in that he's gone to Apocalypse because he believes this is where people like him should be. Like he's gone to Apocalypse because he feels shame at his appearance, and we've seen this before with Orion as well. This idea of feeling shame at how you look, that gets a nice little wrap up in Orion's relationship with, is it Becca?
Becca,
yeah,
the daughter of Hyman.
Yes, but there is a sense of none of this need to have happened, and again, it's Isaac almost deciding to be a cog in this machine of doomsday weapons because he's like, well, this is all I'm good for. throughout the Fourth World stuff, I keep making mention of as above, so below. Things on a minimum scale represent things on a maximum scale.
Mm.
We had that planet of hammer horror monsters, and the vampire character I thought was very reminiscent of Darkseid, and he's literally like a micro entity. In this story, I think Kirby's done it again. He's sort of mapped Isak onto Darkseid and Hyman onto Highfather, in that they're on this smaller scale battlefield, opposite sides of the conflict. They don't meet, but they are behaving in a way similar to how Highfather and Darkseid feels compelled to keep waging war. So does Isak. Hyman is being more aggressive. We learn, but and that's when he things take a turn for him. But he's been waging this guerrilla conflict where he just keeps moving. He's being chased the entire time, and Highfather also just kept refusing to meet Darkseid in battle, and ultimately in this book decides to just leave altogether. Like, completely leave, so I did wonder if that was the idea with these characters, particularly because the sudden reveal of Isak and what's happened to him felt like, well, this is where the story has to go now, so this is what's happened. But I thought this is a smaller version of the conflict between Darkseid and Highfather, because again, it's this idea of one character feels this is inevitable, have to keep fighting. The other character is like, well, I'm just not going to fight you. I'm just going to keep moving.
Mm-hmm. Well, so New Genesis itself is destroyed in this, and I got a little confused. Like, did Highfather set off those bombs, or it didn't seem like Darkseid had done anything?
It seems to have been Highfather's intent, at the very least. In that, New Genesis was infested with all these creatures that Darkseid was sending. He was sending bombs. He had just sent another bomb through boom tubes. Lonar grabbed the bomb, and they were holding onto the bomb, and he was like, hold on to it, don't let it, because we're going to do something with that. And we see a character fly off with a bomb. So they've been stockpiling them, I think. So I think it was a sort of, okay, well, if we're going to use these weapons, we'll take this attack and then we will turn it around and make it something else, which is Lightray's way of thinking as well. I think Highfather and Lightray have a lot in common. They'll take your weapon and make it into something else. And in this case, they already were living in a city in the sky floating above the planet.
Right, the satellite city.
So they just took off. My question was, what about the bug? Are they all just dead? Did our bug friend get to leave with them? We don't see him again. Because I think it was revealed that he wasn't one of the bug. He was actually human.
Right.
Or a humanoid.
Yeah.
But yeah, that beautiful page of Genesis blowing up and the city taking off into space. That's stunning. That's digital art, isn't it? Or photo. He's mashing up some photos.
Oh, that collage page you're talking about. Yeah. It might have been some kind of computer thing, whatever was available in 84, 85.
And he's more down with the animation studios now, so he's probably picking up a few tricks from them. But this is like, this almost anticipates like Dave McKean's Sandman covers, in terms of let's take a bunch of elements and let's photostat them. Okay, let's take another bunch of elements and overlay on that on top. Okay, let's take another bunch of elements and overlay them on top. Okay, let's take another bunch of elements. It's like the amount of work McKean used to do those covers. And I'm just imagining what Kirby was cooking up here, but it's extraordinary. It's a painting. It's an absolute beautiful piece. They just drift off.
Yeah, it looks like a lot of it is photos of like rocks and stuff that just pasted in there.
And a skull, sure. Like a giant skull.
Yeah, there's a skull. More than one skull, I think. And something looks like part of something from Star Wars, some kind of a ship.
I thought it was like Transformers. I thought it looked like Cybertron or something. Yeah,
Could be. I don't know. It kind of reminds me of Darth Vader's fighter, but not sure.
But yeah, it's sort of like the because this series started with Ragnarok, it ends with a refusal to commit to Ragnarok. In that, it's meant to be mutually assured destruction, which again, as you say, was the Cold War ethos of the time. The one thing that's stopping us from going to all out war is that we'll just wipe each other out. And Highfather exercised the third option, which is, well, I'm just going to leave altogether.
Right, and then the people on Apocalypse are like, oh, that's his plan, because they got a satellite city and we don't, so we're completely screwed.
We're screwed. And like they're getting, not only is the sort of debris raining down on Apocalypse, but also they've got nowhere to focus their hatred on anymore. That was the whole point of Darkseid's conflict, that you stuck up the Hunger Dogs, you send them into war because they're the enemy. New Genesis is the enemy. Whereas now it's a case of, well, you're just going to turn on each other because there's no other reason. There's nothing else for you to fight. So he's like, oh, I'll just wipe them all out. It's fine. I'll kill them all. But it is a defeat of his vision. Mm-hmm. And I find it interesting that he talks about Highfather's weapon is paranoia.
Yeah.
When I think we talked about this in previous issues, particularly Mr. Miracle stuff, we were saying, well, Darkseid uses paranoia. Like a lot of what Darkseid does is all about making people afraid of their neighbor. Now, again, I think that's bounced back on him, which is probably Highfather's whole logic. Mm-hmm. He needs an object. He needs an other. If I just remove myself from the game board, he's like a wolf in a cage. He's going to eat himself alive.
So I was a little confused about Micromark because I put some page numbers in my notes, but they're page numbers of the New Gods trade, so it's not of the story itself. But on 358, they're using Micromark as some kind of an invisible camera. They're like spying on people using it, and I wasn't sure how that worked.
Yeah, so it's like it's a machine intelligence. They've put it on this guy's skin, this captive. Or am I thinking of...
No, that guy burst into flame.
He burst into flames, right. He turned into a human bomb. Oh my goodness. Sorry, I didn't go back far enough. But I remember the story. So my rationale was it's a machine intelligence. It can see. And then it can transmit back to them what it sees. Mm-hmm. That's how I made sense of it. But it's like... Mr. Miracle with his circuits. It can do whatever the story needs it to do.
Or Spider Sense.
Yes.
But yeah, they press a button. Micromark pursues Hyman's tracks to Slumeria 4. We move in. We halt at a miserable hovel guarded by its wary dwellers. And we're seeing what they see on the screen. And they see neither Micromark nor us, sire. We go into dismal secret places.
And it's in the bomb that he stole. Like he was taking Darkseid's bomb.
Oh, okay. All right. So that's not quite clear, but okay, it's in the bomb that Hyman is carrying, which then they're able to disintegrate in his hands.
Yeah.
The Apocalyptians have some sort of a remote control. It doesn't blow it up; it just falls apart.
Yeah, just disintegrates because they were. Which is interesting. Why doesn't they just detonate it?
Yeah.
But yeah, like that previous scene where he's presenting his flunky's presenting to Darkseid Micromark as a bomb. Darkseid is saying, if this pygmy can destroy a continent, he's talking about it. He's, I sensed him. So
yeah, him is the bomb.
Him's the bomb. The Micromark, and it's like, again, it's this, he prophesied that this would come, like this sort of spirit of destruction in a circuit, that is how he sees Micromark, and he sees it as the thing that will make him irrelevant, as I said before, but also he's I think he almost sees it like his child, almost.
Mm.
There's a sort of parental pride there. He's smiling at it. And then Hyman just, beams in and steals it.
Right, yeah, it pops in through a boom tube. Coming up, a New Gods Thor crossover of sorts, the return of Lonar and someone else we're not really that surprised to see alive, the baffling ending, comparison of the New Gods to Star Wars, and more. But first, a reminder to join us for bi-weekly 20th Century TV and music trivia quizzes and more on our Patreon page. Every month, patrons donating $4 a month or more also get a full-length podcast episode reviewing an issue of The Amazing Spider-Man by Lee and Ditko. We just released our look at the iconic ASM-33, which Kumar and I both found we had misremembered. Check out our goals and rewards at patreon.com/deconcomics. If you'd rather give a one-time donation, you can do so via PayPal by sending it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We appreciate your support.
You like cheap comic books, right? Well, I'm Professor Allen, and I talk about cheap comic books on the Quarterbin podcast. In every episode, I'll dissect a single comic from my collection, as long as I paid no more than 25 cents for the issue. Forget about $4 new comics that you can read in 4 minutes, or crossover events that can cost $100 to collect. Join me in the Quarter Bin, where even bad comics are a bargain, and good ones are a steal. The Quarter Bin podcast is part of the Relatively Geeky Podcast Network. Visit us at relativelygeekypodcast.blogspot.com or search Relatively Geeky or Quarter Bin Podcast in iTunes. I guarantee it'll be worth every penny.
What did you make of this page about the maggots of apocalypse? They're these kind of big green creatures with kind of mask-like faces. They're just one page and we never see them again. And I wasn't sure what that page was trying to tell us.
That's what I was saying before. So they're on the surface of the planet New Genesis.
So that's that spoilage they're talking about in the next scene where Lonar is pulled to New Genesis with a tractor beam.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
well, it wasn't clear what was coming through the boom tubes when I read that, but okay.
So Darkseid is dropping all sorts of bombs and plagues and creatures on the surface of the planet. This is his new form of warfare. Instead of sending just wave after wave of his own men, Futurama reference for those listening, he's sending wave after wave of his creations. So these creatures, they remind me of something that's bugging me. I think someone's recently borrowed this look for something else. But they're destroying all the flora and fauna. You can see that they're devouring all the plant life. You can also see that they've left behind all these bones of creatures on the surface. And Lonar, we know, was traveling around by himself on his mythical Ragnarok surviving horse.
Well, I had to go back and look. So in Forever People 5, there was a backup story where he was going through the ruins of the old gods, Asgard, and he found a kind of Thor-looking helmet there, and also he found this battle horse that was in suspended animation in kind of a rock whatever. And then we got a 2-pager of Lonar in Forever People 7 where he was showing the horse to Orion. And you feel like Kirby had some kind of plans for Lonar that he didn't get to carry out because everything got canceled. But yeah, then the third time we ever see him is here where Allfather brings him to New Genesis only to tell him that he can't stay there. You're forbidden to return to our planet.
Yeah, that's it. Like he's forbidden to go down to the surface. Like he's been called home. He's now going to join the rest of the New Gods on the satellite city.
Oh, they're on the satellite city. Okay.
Yeah, he can't do his adventures anymore.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, Lonar and Kamandi, I think, are somewhat similar in respect of, there are these characters stranded in an apocalyptic landscape, just exploring and having adventures. And I think that's kind of probably where Lonar was going to go. I do like Lonar. I think we should have seen more of him. One of the other creators, Kirby, was hoping would take up the reins of these concepts. Could have spat out a miniseries or two about Lonar. It's a very rich concept, and I love how Highfather greets him with, "Oh, you're dressed like the old gods," and he doesn't begrudge him it.
And again, he's wearing a Thor-like helmet, so
yeah. And he's like, "Oh, that's very cool."
Yeah, well, in case people don't remember, I mean, the whole fourth world idea came out of Kirby's envisioning what would happen after Ragnarok with the Thor characters at Marvel, but then he decided Marvel didn't deserve all this new IP from him, so he ended up using it at DC. So he can't explicitly say, Marvel's Thor and those guys died and then the new gods came.
It's interesting that Walter Simonson has since done a book with, I think it's IDW, Ragnarok. I have a sneaking suspicion, I've already said this on this podcast, but I really enjoy Ragnarok. I think it's a great book. But the premise of it, again, is that Thor as a revenant, zombie Thor, doesn't realize he's Thor, comes to in a post-Ragnarok world and everything's destroyed, but there are still snatches of life on the planet, on the land, and he sort of goes on this quest. And it's interesting that Simonson and Kirby both decided, let's do a story about what happens after Ragnarok. And both of those books end up at different companies because you can't tell those stories in Marvel. They won't let you.
Well, they've had Ragnarok before, but then later everybody came back. So
yeah, it's the sort of parental guidance version of Ragnarok.
It's the keep our IP version.
Yes, but I really like Lonar, and I like the fact that he's remembered here. We don't see Mr. Miracle and Barda. We don't see Forager, as I said before. We don't see any of these.
I was kind of hoping to see other new fourth world characters, but yeah, it's pretty much all new gods.
Oh, what about Fastback?
Yeah,
where's Fastback? I want to see Fastback. The Justice League cartoon I watched the other night, I just saw that there was an episode of the Justice League which was all about the new gods, and I was like, I should watch that for this podcast. It's a two-parter. Very unusual episode, actually, and again, it shows you post-Kirby a different idea of what these characters are like from other creators. It was not bad, though. But there was a scene towards the end where there's been this catastrophe. The characters think that all the children and New Genesis have been killed, and it turns out they all survived. They're fine, and they emerge from the forest. And then we can see with the children are Mr. Miracle, Big Barda, the Forever People, all these, and they all just appear. They're all just there, and I did wonder if that was somebody, whoever did those episodes, was thinking similar to us just now, in that, we need to make sure people know that they're all alive. At least let them make an appearance. They're all there. We're not going to tell stories about them, but they're there. They're there. They're fine. They're fine. Don't worry about them.
I struggled with this because I read it twice and I started to read it a third time, and I still feel like there's a lot I'm not getting about it. Right.
Yeah. Well, let's quickly let's touch on the actual the art itself, because I don't know if it's because I'm like you, I'm also reading the trade. I don't know if it's the trade I'm reading, if there's been a recoloring, but I think the colors pop, like they really do.
Mm-hmm.
This is a vision of Apocalypse and New Genesis that's far more, and like Darkseid has always been a sort of grey blue meanie, but he's given such definition by the coloring here.
I think
solid.
I think they pretty much have to recolor because the original colors were just done on paper, and they can't photograph it cleanly or something. It was explained to me once before, and I don't quite remember now. But yeah, I think it's a necessity, and yeah, it does look digital. It does look sharp.
I see a credit in the title page. ink, reconstruction, and coloring. And credited are Greg Theakston with Bill Rayleigh and Tony Dispoto. So I assume one of those people has done the re-inking and the recoloring digitally. And then the original inkers and colorists. You also have D. Bruce Berry and Mike Boyer on inks and lettering. They're all credited in addition to Kirby's pencils. So I think, there's been a bit of rework done. But they did a decent job. Like, to my untrained eye, it looks quite, shapely and present. And
yeah, I mean, it would be kind of interesting to get a hold of an original issue and see what what differences there are. But yeah, it looks good.
The page of just how many panels are on this page? That's 8, 11. 14. The 14 panel page
with mostly pictures of Darkseid.
Yeah, just reacting it is incredible. Like there's so much. It is just an image of his face looping on the page, but like there's so much detail, and then the coloring again helps with it, and the inking to the solidity of his eyebrows, the sunken eyes. But yeah, it's a vision of Darkseid that I think gives him more solidity than I've seen before. He looks like a person, whereas previously he looked like a monolith. He looked like an Easter Island head. I did have a note, the previous story was Even Gods Must Die. It was titled Even Gods Must Die, and here we learn it should have been titled Even Gods Must Suffer Massive Blood Loss, because
Orion lives.
Orion's not dead.
And I felt like when Orion and Darkseid meet near the end of the story, I was disappointed that there was no Darkseid saying, "What? You were dead." It just kind of accepts, "Yep, there's Orion," which kind of puzzled me. But I mean, I was not the least bit surprised to see Orion nursed back to health by Hyman.
Yeah, he's just full of holes. And the implication is that, it takes more to kill a god, basically. And even the Hunger Dogs who are there, they're like, Orion should be dead. Look at his body. It's been literally shattered. But nope, he's getting better.
Yeah, I mean, you can see all his bullet wounds on his chest, but yeah, he's alive. He's screaming.
Typical Orion fashion. And then he, fixes up his face, and we introduce this romance which came out of nowhere. And look, I think it's sweet to end Orion's story with him finding somebody and finding love and deciding to become a lover. Like he professes his love to Becca, and he's like going, I am here for you, basically. I'm not going to be this warrior,
and she didn't get killed. This kind of story, the girlfriend suddenly shows up and she's going to die, but she didn't.
But I have to say, I do wish we could have seen that New York socialite again. The lady who said, when I die, I'll come for you. Or I will think of you. I think he was saying, I will think of you as I die. I was going, oh, well, go pay her a visit. Come on, man. You made a deal. But their romance is, it's very quick. But it is sweet. It is sweet that his story ends this way. And then he shows her his true face. And they do have that moment together, and then the plot catches up with them again. Oh, no. New Genesis is blowing up. We need to move things along.
Yeah.
Dark. Yep.
Hyman doesn't make it. Gets killed by Darkseid. At least, until some other creator brings him back, maybe. I don't know if he exists in the current DC universe.
I thought I heard something about Hyman. I thought there was I think somebody had a story where Hyman replaced Highfather. I'm not sure. I'll have to check that. Listeners, don't write any angry letters. Because I think he was back in circulation. But I thought that was very fitting because when he has his teleporting into Darkseid's space to steal the bomb, he does basically say to him, look, we're both going to die, pretty much. But I will frustrate you in such a way that my death will prevent your total campaign of war from succeeding. Like he's playing a chess game with Darkseid at this point, and he probably didn't anticipate that Darkseid would rock up in a scooter to deal with him personally, which is what happens.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think he's at that point where he's like, I'm just going to make sure my daughter, who I've hidden from you her entire life, I'm going to make sure she gets away. Orion's there. They rescued Tigra off camera.
Yeah.
They're going to get away, but yeah, he kills him, and I feel almost as if Hyman's sacrificing himself in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's frustrating for Darkseid in that, well, what other reason do I have to live for now? Like, Highfather's got away from me. Hyman's dead. There's nothing else for me. There's nothing else. Orion's just decided to leave because he rescued his mother, which, as he said in the previous story, was his whole goal. His goal wasn't to kill Darkseid. His goal was to save his mother. That's all he wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's got no war. There's no one's interested. All these characters in this, they're all playing keep away with him now.
Yeah. Oh, come on. Let me have a war with you. Come on. Don't go home.
Keep away, Darkseid, keep away. Darkseid's got cooties.
Yeah, and then as you kind of alluded to earlier, the scene where Orion and everybody's leaving, and you just see like Darkseid getting farther and farther away, just standing there isolated.
Yeah, it's almost up there with that last page of Mr. Miracle, which I was raving about. In terms of the poignancy of it, it's beautiful, and the way Kirby has rendered it with the panel not even fully penciled in. Like, there's just like white. It's on white. There's nothing there. He's just stranded on the panel.
Yeah,
yeah, it's beautiful. He's just left behind on a dying world that he ruined. Like, he completely ruined his own planet.
Yeah. Although then, I guess because of the DC meddling, then he has to say, well, Darkseid's going to rebuild everything.
Sure. But then he'll have to chase Highfather.
Mm-hmm.
Unless that... Okay, so I will admit the majority of this... Coming back to it again, as I've read Hunger Dogs before, but coming back to it again, as the majority of this makes sense. It makes more sense to me now because I've read all this other Forkful stuff thanks to you and this podcast. But that last page of Metron baffles me.
Yeah, he's like found some planet that nobody lives on, and he's towing it along with him, I guess, as a new home for the new gods.
Is that it? Yeah.
That was my guess, although I don't know how he would... Well, he knows everything, but how he would know that New Genesis has been destroyed. But the other thing was the whole idea of the new gods being on the satellite city, flying through space, looking for kind of a promised land. I felt like it's the Israelites wandering in the desert. It's I feel like it's another Jewish reference that Kirby's putting in.
Yeah, no, I saw that. I saw the religious significance of it. The wandering people and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the rendezvous he never considered. So Metron's going to meet someone in a familiar location, so assumingly this area of space that the New God stories have been set in. And he's going to meet the New Genesis satellite city, which in space, which he maybe never would have considered. Is that the implication? But yeah, it just ends on that. And if anything, I don't know if that's meant to give the reader some hope in that, these characters are going to find... Maybe it's the planet... No, they definitively say it's a lifeless planet, because I was just going to say, maybe it's the planet that the Forever people are stuck on. But no, it's a lifeless planet, so it's not theirs.
Yeah, he's accumulated massive knowledge which he's eager to display. Thus, he's trapped a large, young, lifeless planet which Metron pulls in his wake with the help of strange forces toward familiar quadrants, toward a rendezvous he never considered. The end.
Yeah, wow, okay. What? No, what's next? You genuinely think there's going to be like another page at least?
Mm-hmm.
where we see him and the floating city sort of pass in the night and go, oh, hello. Like something just or is it that he will stray into orbit near Apocalypse and Darkseid's like, well, we've ruined this planet, we'll take yours. Right? Like let's destroy another planet, let's start the process all over again. I'm not sure, I don't quite know where that's going. Metron is interesting in that so much of what Metron does is to introduce an element, like he's described here as a wild card. He will make a choice that nobody could have anticipated, and then he leaves the story. And the tragedy of Isak is that Isak was left to continue Metron's work, and Metron just left altogether.
Yeah.
And that destroyed Isak. That's interesting. Again, what is this, the idea of dispassionate knowledge will destroy you? You have to consider your own humanity. You have to consider the consequences of your investigations, your actions. But yeah, here it's like Metron he went off somewhere. He's back. The story's going to continue in a way you didn't expect.
Yeah, I wonder if another creator picked up there. I mean, some things that Kirby set up, like with Deadman, nobody else ever came back and did anything with that. Yeah.
Well, the Deadman stuff with Kirby did seem to be this idea is stupid, I'm going to do it differently. So like, no, we need to go back to the original idea. That's the whole point of the character. He's a dead man. He shouldn't have a body.
Yeah, I suppose so.
But yeah, it's a very oblique ending.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I thought it was a kind of oblique story, but I mean, I got, arms race and, mutually assured destruction and how crazy it is and all that, sure, but there was so much packed in there, and I think it bears multiple rereadings, and maybe on the 25th run you'll say, oh, okay.
But I mean, you are right. Like it stands up to those rereadings as well. Like it is something that gets richer the more I learn about Kirby, the more I learn about what he was trying to draw in. I continue to be fascinated with it. And yeah, the sort of pictures at the end of the trade, you see all the different pinups, but you also see his designs for different characters. Like he was visualizing so much of this. The original pencil works you see as well. It's incredible stuff. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the Hunger Gods, it's both a compromised vision and also a beautifully curious conclusion. There is still some genius that's slipping through here. It's very strange. And I'm really glad I get to, think about it, reflect on it, read over it again. What does this mean? What's he trying to say? I think it's lazy. I've seen a lot of people do this. I think it's lazy to simply, obviously this is a metaphor for the Cold War, right? Mm-hmm. In the same way that people have looked at Lord of the Rings and go, obviously this is a metaphor for atomic power. The one ring to rule them all. That's the atomic weapons. I think it's fascinating that both Tolkien and Kirby, after their wartime experiences, and Tolkien having to see his children go off to war in World War II, both of them reacted to that experience with stories which I don't think are one-to-one allegories, but certainly are concerned with technology as replacing instrumental reason, replacing our ability as thinking beings to control the world or to interact with the world in a mutually beneficial way. Our rationality becomes more destructive towards the world. We start to destroy the environment, and technology accelerates that process. I find it fascinating both of them came away from the experience of total war and then retreated into myth. Like Lord of the Rings and New Gods are both recreations, particularly of Norse mythology, but a number of other mythic traditions as well overlaid on top. And what we get is these visions of war and destruction and smallest glimmer of hope. I think there's a parallel to be drawn there. And that probably is one of the reasons why these works have some staying power, because people realize that these creators are trying to talk to them about what's happening in the world right now, and that there's a continuing relevance of that. And it's not just a simply fairy tale or a simple superhero comic. It's actually trying to have a conversation with you about, well, think about this. Think about what this means. Don't be unreflective. Maybe Kirby's been deliberately obtuse at times because he's trying to get us to think about it. I said to you before in previous issues, like some of the way people just announce dialogue in these books, it's like philosophy to me at times. It feels like a philosophical essay where you just like assert something.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had this sneaking thought I was reading this. This reminds me of Lord of the Rings.
I wonder how much of it was actually, like, how aware George Lucas was of this, because, I mean, we know Kirby recognized New Gods stuff in Star Wars, the Source, the Force, but
Dark side,
yeah, Darth Vader. I wonder if Lucas was actually aware of this. If he was, I can easily imagine him being a comic book reader, so it's possible.
Yeah, and it is interesting how, even if you look at Star Wars as a response to Kirby, both his Marvel and DC era, because, you also have people saying that Vader is Doctor Doom. The aesthetics of Kirby, I think it's fair to say, bleed into a lot of the art for Star Wars, particularly in that first movie, and with the Death Star, the idea of this artificial planet. That is like a dark side weapon, the Death Star. Pun. It is a dark side weapon. As the Star Wars franchise has grown, that Kirby influence has dropped further and further away. And having just recently watched the Obi-Wan Kenobi show on Disney Plus, I watched the first 3 episodes. It is interesting to me how bland the visual palette of the franchise has become. The weirdness, the fascination with technology as a sort of omnipresent element of the world, the sense of either sophisticated technology or improvised technology, like Mr. Miracle pulling together circuits to create a series of costumes. I could see that. I can see that in the first Star Wars movie. I can see, that sort of spectacle derives a lot of fascination from technology. As the series, it's just become more repetitive, and then whatever visual identity the George Lucas films had originally, I think that's been increasingly lost. So I would, if you're listening to this and you are currently employed by Disney to work on some Star Wars shows, I would maybe read Jack Kirby again and get a sense of how he visualized a lot of these ideas, and then try and introduce some more interesting stuff into the background of your show, because it's getting pretty bloody bland. It's not as interesting anymore, both in terms of storytelling, but also the look. The look of Star Wars did a lot of legwork for it as a franchise. It felt like something of the future, something completely unusual, but still somehow familiar. And Kirby's New God stuff is the same. It's a superhero comic, but also it's not. It's mythology, but also it's not. It's science fiction, but also it's religious.
Yeah.
That we've landed on this last book with this apocalyptic storyline, and then at the end of the story, it's just like, but then these characters just leave. I do love that. I do love that Darkseid's been continually saying over and over again, I am inevitable, you can't avoid me, I'm going to destroy you all. And then there's like, all right, we're just going to go, man.
I won't be made redundant by technology. Oh, wait.
Yeah, I was. Oh, shit, it's already happened. Yeah.
Okay, Well, yeah, this has been interesting to go through all of these. We are planning to also discuss Old Gods and New, a companion to Jack Kirby's Fourth World by John Morrow.
Yes. Yeah, look forward to chatting to you about that.
Yeah. I'm waiting for my paper copy to arrive. I decided I didn't want to try to read it digitally, so it might be a few weeks before we get that one out.
And I made the mistake of not doing that.
Well, for years now, I've avoided buying paper books if at all possible, just because of storage issues.
Same.
But it can get kind of tiresome to read everything digitally, and especially now that reading comics on the browser in Comixology is a nightmare. Because I don't always like reading them on my phone. I don't have a tablet. On the phone it's so tiny. So I used to read on the browser, but now anyway,
it's rough. It's funny because when you were saying before about how strange the paneling is in this issue and the layouts are so strange, the thing I thought was interesting about it was I actually found it easier to read than the younger talks because even the crappy Kindle app panel view captures this quite well. There's such bite-sized panels that it was able to understand that. I didn't get lost on the page like previously, and even just looking at the full page, you can see it's a bit confusing. But for some reason, with the panel-to-panel view now in the app, you can read Hunger Dogs pretty well. But the majority of my comic collection that I have digitally, it's a nightmare. I really don't like it. I really have a problem with it. I'm very upset.
I found, sometimes the guided view is set up wrong. They'll get things out of order or they'll miss things. So what I'd found is that if I just turn my phone sideways, I can just scroll through the comic. And if I want to see the whole page, I can rotate it back. But that's become a relatively better way to read. Not completely satisfying, but...
Yeah, so all you need now to do to successfully read a comic book in Comixology is risk RSI. Great.
The Hunger Dogs can be found in the Jack Kirby New Gods trade paperback published by DC. You can help the Deconstructing Comics family of podcasts by joining us on Patreon at patreon.com/deconcomics. And go to deconstructingcomics.com to connect to us on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube, to shop on Amazon to support the show, and to find links to subscribe to the podcast. Our theme is by J.B. Anderton. If you're looking for some constructive feedback on your comic, send it to us and we'll critique it on our spin-off podcast, Critiquing Comics. Send it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We'll read it and record our critique. Next week, Kumar talks with Gary Spencer Millage, creator of the series Strange Haven. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics. Okay.
Are we ending on that?
RSI? I'm not sure what that is.
Oh, repetitive stress.
Okay.
Yeah, it's you usually get it from how you're seated in front of your computer. You can get pains. It's pretty debilitating.
Eye strain is a bigger problem.
Eye strain also, yeah, but it's just the idea of you holding your phone sideways and scrolling through, like, that is not good for you either. Like, that's bad. Just for the sake of your hand. And yeah, it's just ridiculous that we've been reduced to this.
Yeah. Anyway, so yes, Fourth World. Okay, I'm going to stop recording.